She was quiet and friendly, neighbors say, and she lived a simple life in her middle-class home here on Jarvis Street in this pleasant Aliquippa neighborhood. Nothing about the lifestyle or life story of Maria Chiacco suggests she would be a victim of a robbery or murder, but in the 76th year of her life, Maria would be the victim of both. Perhaps even stranger than the crime itself is the fact that investigating police officers were told to drop the case, ordered in fact to stop their investigation of the 1987 robbery and murder after it had barely begun, and before anyone could be charged with the crime, before anyone had to answer for the death of Maria Chiacco. I'm LeVar McBride, and this is Cold Case, Beaver County.
911, what is your emergency?
You got 3 people of interest still, say, I do. 3 people of interest, then you got that blank face.
That's why nobody really knows if she is dead or alive.
You were set free and you were set free to go kill.
We've never gotten that one break. We've never gotten that one break. You know, we will though.
Danielle Chiacco Rose was only in the 6th grade when her grandmother was killed, but she remembers her vividly and says Maria has shaped her life.
I was very, very close to her, you know, so I learned Italian from her as a child. I think the thing that I could say that sums her up most of all is that she was very much family-oriented and always directed towards my dad. No matter how old he would have been, she again, the typical Italian mother, worrying about her son, making sure everybody was accounted for.
Danielle has even traveled back to her grandmother's hometown in Italy and met her family.
So she still has a huge family there. They love her dearly. They're still, you know, everybody sits around and talks about things that she used to do when she was younger as a young mother. You know, I really got a good idea of the kind of person she was.
Maria's neighbor remembers her as a friendly woman, but someone who was very wary about strangers.
The front door was never unlocked, never. Unless, you know, she opened the door for somebody, if she knew you.
There was nothing extraordinary about the start of the evening on November 3rd. Danielle visited her grandmother and then walked around the corner to her own house. It was in the following hours that neighbors noticed something very unusual at Maria's house.
She never ever left that porch light on after dark, the front porch. When my daughter and son-in-law came home at 2 a.m., no lights. When my daughter, I took her down to the bus stop down on Franklin Avenue at 6 a.m., the light was on, porch light was on, and I said, Kim, I said, that's awfully strange that porch light is on.
Other people also noticed the porch light on that morning, including Joe Percival, who is now the Assistant Chief of Police in Aliquippa. He was just 12 when the crime occurred, and his family was close friends of the Chiacco family.
I remember getting up that morning for school and getting ready and everything, go outside to the bus stop. I noticed her porch light was on, and it was kind of eerie. It was like a orange-colored light, and because she never did that. Never kept the lights on. Always locked her doors. You know, she was always in the house around when it gets dark. The light was on, and it was still kind of dark out. You know, so it was kind of spooky.
The porch light was what eventually led a neighbor to call Maria's son Dominic. He rushed over to the house, only to find a gruesome nightmare. His mother beaten to death on the kitchen floor.
Nobody deserves to die in the manner she died. No one deserves to be, you know, left basically like a piece of trash. She died alone by herself on the floor, and no one was there with her. You know, for my dad to have found her, I mean, it was very tragic. And so those are all things that we will always have to live with.
The first 2 officers to arrive on the scene were Tom Buffalini and Chippy Lindsay, who found no signs of forced entry to the house.
It was a situation that was unusual for that neighborhood for sure. We felt at the time that the person who must have done this must have been somewhat known to her, because Mrs. Chiacco wouldn't let anybody into her house because she was a woman who would keep to herself, very shy, and she spoke very little English.
Mother, of course, didn't have very much. She lived on the bare necessities.
Because of that, her killers didn't get very much: a gun, and a small amount of cash. In a startling, almost unbelievable course of events, the investigation into Maria Chiacco's murder was halted before it ever got off the ground. The officers began to develop a list of suspects, people who spoke Italian and may have known Maria. But they didn't get much farther than that before they were told to stop investigating, and the case was shelved.
Chiacco should have been, with the way cases were handled during that era, should have been handled by the Aliquippa police and a captain by the name of Ciccarelli, who was their detective captain and did a great job on a lot of cases. Typically, the county detectives and or the state police were coming to assist at that time. The county detectives weren't involved in this case at all. The state police get involved, but they were very minimally involved. There was a trooper down there initially. They did the crime scene with the Aliquippa police.
Captain Ciccarelli was never involved in the case, and the state police involvement ended as quickly as it began.
Captain Ciccarelli missing from the case was very interesting when you go back to look at it.
We started into the investigation, and we went to work the next day and continued with the investigation. We were called into the station and were pulled from the investigation.
Lindsay was never given an explanation, but he believes he knows the motivation for his superior pulling him from the case.
I believe it's just possibly jealousy, or not wanting to see a fellow officer respond to something and investigate and solve a crime. And that's very possible.
Lindsay said that he would have been in trouble at work if he had ignored orders and continued on with the investigation.
I'm still upset about it. I carry that with me. It should have never happened. I would think that if we had continued, that we would have found the two culprits. I believe the two culprits that committed this murder. But since we were pulled off the case, there wasn't much we could do after that.
After the crime, things were never the same in the neighborhood.
It changed everything. You know, it went from like a happy place, nobody was worried about anything, to like this eerie feeling, especially when the street lights came on. To this day, it still feels funny up there.
Police found what file there was on the case recently. They hope it's not too late to solve the case.
We can. I never like to give up. I always believe that there is hope. This is one that hopefully should have been solved quicker, but I'm hoping to see that it's solved all these years later.
We want to look at this case. We've got some new technology now in the crime lab area that we're going to send some of the evidence to see if we can find something new in the evidence that was collected back then. We're also hoping to be able to talk to some people that were around back then, see what they remember of this incident.
Talking to investigators after all these years has opened up old wounds for Danielle.
I carried around a lot of guilt because since I was the last person this year and we had a conversation that evening before that happened, you know, the police had sat me down several times as a young child and asked me questions over and over, you know, what was the conversation with your grandmother? You know, why don't we look at, you know, this profiles? I want you to tell me if you've seen anyone that resembles this person in the area, and so on and so forth. And just asking me, you know, these poignant questions that I just, even to this day, continue to repeat in my mind. You know, I replay the conversation over and over and over again, hoping still, even as almost a 40-year-old woman, to come up with an answer, you know, myself.
Despite the heartbreak, Danielle and her family have tried to find new meaning from this tragedy and new strength for each other.
It brings our family closer. You know, it brings the family in Italy closer so that we all know that, you know what, no matter what, we're strong enough to get through this. This is the first time in my life I've ever been able to talk about it, to talk about the feelings that I had, to talk about the loss. No one has ever asked. I was a kid then, you know, and it was more focused on the investigation itself. But even to be able to talk about it and say it out loud and have people in the community be reminded and to hear these words from me, that's almost a sense of healing for me already.